Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participating in this breakout session. I did this in Dusseldorf as well a month ago, and the turnout was, it was much more than this, so maybe we can keep this more interactive. I might change things a little, but fundamentally, we're going to talk about how to make your next generation network work for you. We heard Mark talk about, business social, some of the traits that we need to incorporate in our companies as we go ahead. We also heard from Marianne earlier about how automation is critical, how identifying different paths of automation are also equally important. So we are talking about bringing you a network, and what does that exactly mean? So a network, depending on how you look at it, means a few different things to different people. The way we look at a network is a network of your trading partners. You need to collaborate with them, you need to engage with them, you need to transact with them. And our ultimate goal with all of this is to build an ecosystem. Data is our currency, data is the oil of the new generation, and so on and so forth. A lot of interesting trends going on there, social, mobile, cloud, big data, and so on. So what we did was we put all of this together and said, this is where we start. This is our journey towards embarking on an ecosystem. And without further ado, let me actually go ahead and show it to you. I don't have any more slides than this, I guess. So my colleague Antonio here is driving it at the back. So in case there are any issues with the demo, it's absolutely not my fault. And if there are any issues with the system being slow, again, it's not my fault, and so on. So let's start with our ecosystem and the way it looks like now. The supply chain operating network, we log into it as an Elimica user. We have multi-factor authentication enabled. Antonio is actually getting that code off of a device, off of his phone. We use a third-party tool called Authy in order to enable it. So that's your added security to get into our network. Now, once we are here, there are a lot of different features of the network. Again, bear in mind, our goal is to build an ecosystem. We have partner discovery, we have campaigns, we have end-to-end visibility, we have a lot of user management, we have the analytics section, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and actually embark on another journey. What we want to do here is I want to cover 3 use cases. The first use case is let's onboard a partner to the network. The second use case is to integrate that partner to another trading partner. And the third use case is, you may have heard of the network bridge and how we want to enable migrating partners from our existing 1.0 platform to the new platform that's 2.0. So we'll go through that as well. So 3 scenarios. First scenario, Neo Seller is the name of a supplier who wants to get connected to Elimica. So let's go ahead and connect Neo Seller to the Elimica network. We're going to create a HTTPS connection. This is actually happening in real time. There is no gimmicks here. We choose an umbrella company. Again, we have a lot of different options to connect. We have HTTPS, we have AS2, we support SFTP, we support SOAP, and in addition, there are 2 different types of authentication. We could use a certificate-based authentication or a user ID and password-named authentication. We can also go ahead and download certificates from your system, so you don't need to exchange digital certificates with us via email and any other media. Once we have that, we save the connection and we go ahead and test it, and that's pretty much it, really. So hopefully the test works, and once we do that, let's see. And hello, Ignite2015, North America, I guess. All right. So we send a test message. We're actually sending a message to a server while we're doing this, and we're going to check to see if the connectivity works. So these are some of the steps we've taken in order to fundamentally reduce the pain around connectivity and establishing technical connection. Now, in that situation, if there were an issue, you see the show delivery book link. You can actually go there and start debugging, get in touch with your trading partners and say, hey, I'm seeing this problem. So it's no longer a complicated, convoluted mess around firewall management and routing rules and blah, blah, blah. It's all visible. It's right there. You can actually be on the phone now while you establish connectivity and be done with it in a few minutes, as we just did. Second aspect of onboarding Neo Seller to the network. We've successfully connected Neo to our environment. Bear in mind, one of the key differences with the 2.0 platform is that we onboard trading partners to Elimica. We're not really connecting people to each other. We are connecting them to Elimica, and through our universal business document-driven canonical model, we are able to actually enable business processes between trading partners. So let's go ahead and actually build a map, which is the second aspect as it relates to onboarding a trading partner. In this case, Neo seller uses an IDOC, SAP IDOC document. They're going to receive a purchase order. We do have a few infrastructure pieces around schema and business unit and the direction of flow and so on. In this case, it's an outbound document from Elamica to Neo seller. We're going to put those details in as it relates to the seller company, the business message schema, and so on. And go ahead and get into our mapping IDE. So one thing I forgot to mention in the connectivity layer, we actually got a patent for that technology. I can talk more about it if you're interested. We also have a patent for this technology here, which uses our universal business document, which is what you see on that side. So that's our representation of a purchase order. It's our canonical model of a purchase order. And on this side, you see the Neo seller's IDOC document that we get. So we're going to start enabling mapping now. Again, a key difference here, we use a test-driven approach. So we're going to create a test first to see how close we are to the expected result. So in this case, we submit a message that's expected, our canonical model on the left again, and Neo seller's IDOC sample document that we receive as part of our collaborative onboarding process. Let's go ahead and save that, and we ran the test there, and we saw that there is an actual partner structure and there's an expected partner structure. The expected partner structure, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but the rows here at the bottom have a red kind of line. I think it's just because of the projection you can't see it. There's a lot of different errors or issues with this map, and our goal is to actually go ahead and fill these gaps, okay? So that is mapping. You want to ensure that your actual structure matches the expected structure, and that's the goal around mapping. So in this case, what we did was we preloaded the system with IDOC specific utilities. So SAP IDOC utilities, let's go ahead and choose some of those and see what happens when we run the test again. So we pre-built some of these libraries in order to enable quicker mapping, automate some of the functions around specific fields and so on. So let's go ahead and run the test again. And you see there's a 0, -4, and 0. So those are the different levels of warnings and errors that are in the field. So now if you observe, again, I apologize, you can't see the fields highlighted in red very clearly, but those are the two fields that Antonio is highlighting that are in error at this point. So because we chose the library-based approach, we were able to reduce the delta or the gap between the expected structure and the actual structure. We are not done yet. There is an important piece of magic that we need to pull out of our hat now. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill that particular gap associated to the date time fields through the usage of a custom script. We use JavaScript and Clojure. Those are the two languages that we support underlying our technology. However, JavaScript is more easy. It's easier to understand. It's easier to have access to resources too, and so on. So we're going to go ahead and create a date time splitter function here, and Antonio is going to do it in real time. So this is pretty interesting. So once we are done here, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, the gaps between the date time fields will hopefully have been filled up, and we're going to run the tests again until we get to a successful state, which is when the actual partner structure matches the expected partner structure. Let's go ahead and save this. We do have it here, and we go ahead, save progress, and run our tests again. So now you see that, and again, you can't see any big difference here, but there's absolutely no gaps. Well, the number's highlighted, which is good. So there's 0 gaps between the actual structure and the expected structure. So that is mapping in a nutshell. So we've taken our core canonical universal business document and mapped it to an SAP IDOC document. So we established connectivity. Neo is connected to Elamica. Neo is mapped. The order create is mapped. So let's go ahead and actually enable this so that we can actually start testing or transacting with Neo. So then we go to our configuration management tool, and we go there and actually create a contract. So a contract is, it's an abstraction. It actually relates a connection to a map. So we created the connection earlier, and we created the map next So now we're going to relate the two so that we can start enabling the flow of transaction in our network. IDOC documents is the mapping document that we chose. The connection configuration should belong to Neo. And keep an eye out for the processing modes. There's 3 of them. There is config, test, and live. We'll get back to that in a minute. Now, additional services here. This is interesting in that we could choose a lot of different services. So you may have services typically fall into validation, cross-reference, business rules, message splitting. So there's different levels of complexity associated to business process enablement, and we can add as many services as needed. So if you think of this flow between Elemica and Neo, and we are able to add a lot of services in the middle, similarly we can do it on the other side as well. So now we have an ecosystem where we have services that are added between Elemica and trading partners. So this can be surfaced, this is analyzable, and it's much more deterministic. In this case, I don't think we're going to add any services. We're just going to go ahead, enable this order document in our system. So we go ahead and save the message contract. We have it here now. And that should be the first flow. And in the network config manager, we're going to go ahead and create Neo's network. So what this means is, again, we talk about the network. We are bringing you a network. Our goal is to be able to create Neo on the network and add many more partners to Neo. So Neo is a supplier. So we're going to slowly start adding different buyers to Neo. Okay? So the way we do that is we go ahead, add a business process. We've preloaded the system with different business processes, logistics road, logistics ocean, order management, and so on. We're going to add a message contract that we created earlier. This is something that we just created. Go ahead, save. So now we've created a business process. We can add more messages. In this case, you'll see that there's only an order create. In this case, there's only an order create. So we can add as many messages as we want to our business process. You could add an order response, a ship notice, invoice, and so on, as it relates to the order management process. I believe we need to go ahead and add a partner to Neo Chemicals. In this case, well, we're going to do that next. So that's the first phase, okay? We're going to go ahead and actually jump to the next session, or rather the next topic, which is where we add a partner to Neo Seller. So let's go ahead and save this network configuration. We have a company called Uber, I believe. Okay. So Uber buyer is interested in transacting with Neo Chemicals. So Uber buyer is going to send us ChemXML documents, in this case, the SIDEX order create document, and the IDOC is something that we've already mapped. So let's assume for a minute that we already went ahead and built the map between Uber buyer and Elemica. Here we are actually enabling the relationship between the two. Let's go ahead and save this. So what we've done here is we've added Uber buyer and we've related them to Neo. So if you think of yourself or your company as Neo, what we are talking about is gradually adding more and more partners onto your network. And that's what this configuration tool enables. Again, we spoke about config, test, and live modes. Let me touch upon that briefly. So what that means is, think of config mode as being a mode where you actually are working, you are unit testing your changes. You're actually not transacting with the partner. You have some sample messages. You want to locally test some of your changes. Test mode means you actually are able to send messages to a test system of the trading partner. And live means it's live in production mode. So here we are able to promote these configurations from one environment to another, or from one mode to another. And the way we do it is by employing a strong governance process. We actually work through a governance process. We have a change management review process in place so that the changes that need to go in are the changes that actually go in. There is a review process as well, and Antonio is going to click and say this is a bad idea to skip it, but we're going to do that in the interest of time. So we go ahead and save this. Now this configuration has been moved successfully into the test mode. Okay. So again, this is important because what we've fundamentally done is now we had those connection points between Neo and Elemica, Uber buyer and Elemica, and then we go to the network manager and we actually enable these relationships. So fundamentally, we've decoupled the message transmission from message transformation, which is which was always a challenge in some of these old systems. So in the background, I think Antonio went ahead and submitted the sample message from Uber to Neo in our dashboard. So let's go ahead and log in to the dashboard solution in order to look at what the message looks like. So in this case, there was a message from Uber buyer to Neo seller. Let's select the one in test mode that was successful. There was one from earlier, that's fine. So we were, and this happened in the background where we actually went ahead and submitted an order create message, a SIDEX ChemXML order create message from Uber buyer to Neo seller. All right, so this is, we call it a pretty view. I apologize for the delay, not sure what happened there. Again, what we do here is you can search for these messages. The important thing here is each and every field here in this message is searchable. So we don't need to necessarily go through the hassle of remembering what is it that you submitted and so on. So in this case, if you just pick Uber buyer or you pick Neo seller or you pick one of the data points there, maybe Sesame Street, and you search for it, you're going to get this message back. And you also see the transmission status to the end partner. So you can be sure that any message that comes through Uber buyer gets successfully transmitted, transformed first into our UBD, and transformed again to the IDOC that Neo seller wants, and you can see the end status of a message. So now we have successfully added a buyer to a seller in this relationship. So that was the second use case I wanted to cover. Now let's jump to the third one. So the third use case is a little more involved in that we spoke a lot to you about migrations and upgrades. So we're talking about migrating people from customers from 1.0 to 2.0. What does that exactly mean? What it means is you have your network of partners, be it logistics partners, carriers, 3PLs, etc. It could be your customers or it could be your suppliers. We want to take them and move them from our existing 1.0 system to our new 2.0 system. How do we go about doing that? So the first step in the equation was to come and intercept some of these requests or this data that comes into our existing 1.0 system. And we call it internally the network bridge, which is a distributed set of infrastructure across 2.0 and 1.0. The 2.0 system is completely cloud-based. The 1.0 system is on the ground. And so what we do with the network bridge is enable this link between the two systems, and we're able to intercept it, transmit messages, and in 2.0, we actually determine whether there is a match based on a partner pair, document type, to see if we need to process the message in the new platform or not. That's how we slowly enable migrations and upgrades from 1.0 to 2.0. So that way, you don't have to make any fundamental changes to your system. You're still connected to 1.0, and based on working with you collaboratively, we have a core team, we have a project manager, and so on associated to each and every migration project. We work through the details with you, and I had a question earlier from Rene, and we manage it, and we actually identify which triplet needs processing in Mercury and which one does not. So in this case, what we'll do is we did get a request in this example that Neo seller wants to actually transact with a buyer in our network, and that buyer has to be green certified, and we do know that that buyer is in the QuickLink 1.0 platform. So let's go to our discovery module and actually look and search for this partner. Let's put in QuickLink 1.0, a buyer, and who is green certified. And let's see what comes back. All right. So yes, there is a company called Vintage Buyer that we are not connected to. You see the red pin there on the side. So what we'll do now is we're going to go ahead and see if Vintage Buyer, who's currently connected to 1.0, if we can take their message in 1.0 and actually use some of the tools in 2.0 and try to test and see how close we can get the output to. So I showed you the connectivity and the mapping. What we're going to do now is pick this message in the background, run some regression tests, fine-tune it, and get it to a point where we actually have an exact match. So what that means is we are able to certify that we can upgrade Vintage Buyer from 1.0 to 2.0. So let's go ahead and do that. I do believe we should have some messages from vintage buyer. So you'll see an interesting toggle here, Quick Link 2.0 and Quick Link 1.0. We know vintage buyer is connected to 1.0. Let's go ahead, search for them, believe in test mode, if I'm not mistaken, and you'll see a few messages here. So let's go ahead, copy that message in the background, and copy that message in the background and go back to our regression test suite. So here we are able to go ahead, create a regression test where we are specifically going to test the output as it occurs in 1.0 and try to match it to the IDOC that NeoSeller needs. So that's the idea of taking vintage buyer from 1.0 and actually migrating them or enabling them on the 2.0 platform. Let's go ahead and paste the IDOC document, save the regression test, and vintage buyer connection. It should update the status in a second. Yeah, let's go ahead and run it. Hopefully should finish soon. If it does not, that's fine. Okay, so we got a success. So what this means is we are able to successfully take a 1.0 message, and we actually did that. We took a 1.0 message, we compared the outputs, we looked at what NeoSeller needs, ran a regression test, and matched it. So now we are able to certify that these two messages match, and the expected message is equal to the actual message. And that's how we go about certifying a trading partner as 2.0 enabled. So that's the story in a nutshell. We can go ahead now that we know that vintage buyer is compatible with Neo. We can go ahead to the network config manager and add vintage buyer to NeoSeller's relationship. And this is something we already did with Uber buyer earlier. So we can go ahead, add another partner called, we choose a business process, Neo's order create, and we choose vintage buyer. Yep, save it. Yep, for the IDOC and ChemXML, I believe. Yes. Save it. So now you've added a 1.0 partner to the 2.0 network. So that's how we upgrade a partner from our existing system to a new system. So what we went through is, in a nutshell, we integrated NeoSeller to Elamica first, set up a connection through our UBD-based, Universal Business Document-based canonical. We integrated them, we mapped, we tested, and then we went ahead, added Uber buyer to the network. So we integrated Uber buyer to NeoSeller, and then we went to our 1.0 system and added vintage buyer to NeoSeller's network. So that's how we bring the network to you. And we have 0.0 minutes left. Questions? It's actually a very good question, in that we got the same question in Europe as well. Fundamentally, these tools are some things that we use internally. We need to use it first. We get to a critical mass, we get to a threshold, and once we are comfortable that the security models work in the way we need it to, and there's certain things that we can open up to our partners, there's certain things we should not, and there's certain things that we cannot. So we need to take stock of that, most probably in Q1 of next year, and then we'll come up with a design to actually open it up in self-service mode. I mean, it's going to happen. We just need to take stock sometime next year. So there are three levels of integration. We only touched upon one. So thank you for pointing it out. So primarily, say you have an IDOC. We strongly believe, based on what we've seen in our network, that there's nothing called a standard IDOC. I mean, it's just a notion. So let's assume there is something called a standard IDOC, in that, say, 80% of the people follow some guidelines. And for the sake of this discussion, let's call it standard. Most of the IDOCs are custom, right? And what we do is, through the JavaScript tool that we showed you, as well as direct mapping possibilities and the addition of services, which we did not add any services, but when we build a contract, we're able to add as many services as we want. So the whole system is actually built using this language called Scala. We can preload the system with a lot of the standard services, like message splitting is one of them. Message aggregation is another, and multi-destination routing is another. So we can actually allow users to choose different services, and some of these services could be as basic as validation, cross-referencing, all the way to business rules and complex splitting. So we can enable all those services. You can add as many as you want, and that gives you the right level of customization. So in combination with JavaScript capabilities, as well as any structural validation / modifications through the services, we give you that flexibility in order to make the map work for you. So that's the second case. But the third advanced case is the middleware itself. If there are parts of your middleware that needs to be replicated, or that needs to, the middleware functions that need to occur within our network, those are also possible as long as they fall into the validation, cross-referencing, business rules, and any advanced messaging functions.
But in the short term, that would be controlled by limited supply stage.
That's right. Currently it is, and that was Gary's question earlier, to say, when can you open it up? So it's still going to be a professional services-based engagement where we work with you and say, what is it that you exactly need? Is it standard? Or is it low in complexity, medium, or high? And then we talk, we understand the requirements, and based on the best fit approach, we either pick what we have, or we build something custom for you, or we find a middle ground. No, it's not. So that was the third case which I was trying to describe. So in a case like PSDT, what we are fundamentally talking about is taking your middleware and actually replicating and controlling the middleware functions in our ecosystem. So we enable it through a UI, and you have access to your master data. When I say master data, it's more like network master data. So you're able to say, for this ship to, for this product, do this. So you're able to do that in self-service mode outside of these transformations. So the transformations is something that we'll take care of. But how we want to control it and guide it will be in self-service mode, which is what you currently do. So that setup will not change. But when we move the logic here, your transformation and the data flow will go through these maps that are built here specifically. So we separate the UI and the network master data management from the mapping. There's a lot of moving parts. It's a loaded, large question. Different customers, we've already started working with about 4 different customers on the upgrade process. That's where we are today. However, what's going to happen is we're going to speed it up some more, beginning end of this year, early next year. So different customers are going to be at different rates and different paths. We also have to consider business processes and complexity of business processes as we undertake these upgrades. We also have to see dependency on some of our smart link applications. So there is a gamut of complexity. We call it an integration spectrum, which we need to account for as we look at, saying whether this partner is ready for an upgrade or not. The second thing that we also do is, if we are actively working with you, we try to see if there are current implementations that can actually start going on the new platform instead of doing it in 1.0 and then again doing it in 2.0, and we are like, why are we duplicating costs for both of us, or effort? So there is that aspect to it as well. Now again, we have a core team which is project managed. So we work very closely with you and we say, this is our proposed plan for upgrading you based on these constraints that we have. On top of that, if you actually open up and say, this is what your current pipeline looks like for the next 6 months to 1 year, then we can account for that and actually modify the overall plan. So that is where we are currently with a lot of different partners. We, outside of actually mapping and testing with 4 of the customers, we are actively engaged in putting these plans together. So there's no simple answer to your question. Upgrades can last anywhere between 4 months to 18 months, depending on the complexity, number of trading partners, different systems, and the general integration spectrum you fall under. All right, I think that's all the time we have. Thanks a lot. That was great.